I lived in New York for about 12 years. I know some of your teachers. So how many of you know Salvador Bolivar?
Boulevard?
Boulevard.
So Salvador and I worked together when we were in our 20s and here in the city and just trying to break into the film industry. You're going to first watch Sugar Pathways. Sugar Pathways took me 10 years to produce. It's a very detailed film on the Puerto Rican migration from Vieques and Puerto Rico to the U.S. Virgin Islands. Sometimes when we talk about migration, we have a tendency of thinking solely that migration is just from Puerto Rico to the United States. But migration, as we all know, happens throughout the entire world. And so you're going to see a very detailed film. The reason why that film is, it's 51 minutes long. It took me 10 years to produce. I was living in New York. I was 24 when I started it. Was because I produced another film, another short film called Vieques and Island Forging Futures. That particular film was 17 minutes long, which you won't be seeing today, but you can see it online. Good morning. Good afternoon, sir.
Oh, good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon, man.
You can just, you don't have to call me ma'am. Anyway, so Vieques and Island Forging Futures, I was in my 20s when I produced that film. How many of you know about Vieques and the bombings that were occurring once upon a time on the island?
Vehicles, like vehicle with bombs?
Yeah, like a small little island next to Puerto Rico that was part of a bombing range of the United States Navy. No.
Not heard of it.
Okay.
Vehicle bomb.
So in 1999, right? Well, let me take it a little bit further because this film talks about it real quick. But so you guys can get an idea, so you're not just watching a movie and going like, what's going on, right? In the 1930s, the United States, obviously, you know that Puerto Rico is a part of the United States, it's U.S. territory, so is the U.S. Virgin Islands. It was part of the idea that to protect the Germans from coming in and taking over during the Nazis period, the United States decided to have the U.S. Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico was a whole different story with 1898, right, during the Spanish-American War. Part of the idea was that to have one of the world's most powerful naval stations in the Caribbean by the United States. So there's an area in Puerto Rico that's called Roosevelt Roads, and then there's a little island about 20 to 40 miles away called Vieques. Vieques and Culebra, these two Puerto Rican islands, were bombing practices areas, right? And Roosevelt Road on the mainland was like a stationary area where they track all these bombs. Those bombs had mercury, napalm, depleted uranium. So when you hear about the Vietnam War, and you hear about even wars, most recent wars, Gulf, whatever, those were practiced, prior soldiers were practicing bombing practices on Vieques. So fast forward in the 2000s, unfortunately, the U.S. Navy, one of the jet pilots, dropped 500-pound bombs, and those 500-pound bombs went array, and they killed a Puerto Rican civilian security guard and injured 4 others. That caused an international outrage. People from all over the world were flying to Puerto Rico and to Vieques to demand the U.S. Navy, after 60 years, to stop bombing on the island. Now, if you know anything about the Caribbean and how it affects us, and we don't have a lot of time and I can go on this, but when it comes to the environment and global warming, this is one of the main reasons why it was so important to stop the bombings on the island. Because when these bombs are practiced and they fall from thousands of feet onto this island, right, and they explode and they have all kinds of cancerous contaminants, when the winds start blowing east, because it's the trade winds and they start blowing, so those contaminants are blowing to Puerto Rico. Those contaminants are blowing through Bahamas, and it comes all the way to the United States, to Florida, and especially during the hurricane season. So that gives you a gist about where I started, right? I did not start off wanting to make films that were guerrilla-style films. I started off wanting to make films that were beautiful, and that would help people of color, and that would talk about gay relationships, and change the world at the same time, and bring people together. I happened to be in New York, and I stumbled into my friends that were protesting Vieques, and they were like, where are you going? I was planning to go to Kenya, because at the time I had a crew cut, and I was sort of what you guys call transgender. At the time it was called cross-dressing, and I was in Kenya doing a program, and I could pass as a boy. And I was accepted. In Kenya, the name Johanna is not feminine, it's masculine. So I was allowed to go into the mosque. And I thought that was really interesting, but I'm so respectful, I'm not gonna go in there and be like, yeah, I'm a dude, when I don't really feel like a dude, but I'm feeling like a dude, but I'm not gonna go into a Muslim mosque and pass. But that sparked my interest in creating a documentary on sexuality in Mombasa, Kenya, and looking at and studying sexuality from that point of view. That was 20 years ago. But the Vieques thing happened, and I had a tool which was being able to tell stories, and I had a camera, and my life path kind of changed in filmmaking. The next film, so Sugar Pathways, when I did Vieques, I was hammered because I went on a college tour, and people were just hammering. People loved it, students loved it. High school students were like, yeah, right? And that's how I knew I had a really good thing, because the first people that saw my short film were high school students. And they just got so riled up, and I was like, yeah. But when I was touring with the film, and it was a very different time period, you guys probably were in elementary school, and they didn't believe, some of the audience members didn't believe that this was happening, that the United States had done such a terrible thing, that the Navy, the military, and the enslavement of people. So when I started getting hammered, I decided to do a feature film that would explain in detail the truth. So again, I started right after Vieques, by 24, 25, I started doing tons of research. I went to the National Archives, I got the Paul Robeson Foundation, I got Center for Puerto Rican Studies at Hunter College to back me up, but nobody knows what a Puerto Rican is. So that became even harder. That's what Sugar Pathways is, a detailed information documentary, and that's why it's so important for you guys to see all the levels of making a film like that. And Solin, which you're about to see, is my first, I've worked on narrative films, but it's my first one that I wrote and directed, and I paid for it myself, practically, with fundraising. And Solin is about two women who are in love, and they're reconnecting, and their love is interrupted by a stalker. That's it. Hope you like them.
Thank you. They saw the trailer. We can cut. I'll cut. You got that? Give the button.